Chapter 3. Actions speak louder than words. This proverb is believed to have been first mentioned by an English lawmaker by the name of John Pym in 1628, as recorded by the parliamentary proceedings at that time. The words of this proverb are as powerful and true today as they were when they were first spoken. What we do every single day carries more weight than what we say. People will ultimately judge you not by what you say, but by what you do. Action is the bridge between a vision and its fulfillment. You are more likely to reach your goal by acting rather than just talking. The great inventor Thomas Edison put it this way: a vision without execution is hallucination. In other words, you can have the best vision or goal and even have a great plan to achieve it. But if you don't act, you are basically a daydreamer. It is the action that will move you towards your goal. This does not mean that you should not exercise due diligence. It is important that you have a plan and weigh the pros and cons, but it's the action that will get you there. You may argue that the task ahead of you is just so huge, and you may be anxious just thinking about it. The best way to tackle this is to divide it into subtasks, and then tackle these subtasks consistently every day. Every small step moves you towards your goal. Even the highest buildings on earth were built block by block. Some might argue that they've heard about this before and even taken some action but failed. They therefore conclude that it is better to stop taking action due to their past bad experience. Some may go on to conclude that they are maybe just not lucky, or that destiny wanted it to be as it is. While I fully understand their line of argument, there are two problems with it. First, many successful people experience temporary failure before achieving their goal. And second, no one succeeds without taking action. Benjamin Disraeli, a two-time British Prime Minister over a century ago, once put it this way: action may not always lead to happiness and success, but there is no happiness and success without action. I could not agree more. Action in nurture. I once observed a father scolding his little son for not wearing a helmet before setting off for a bike ride. He went on to tell him how dangerous it is to ride a bike without putting on his helmet. The message he was conveying to his son was true, and every responsible parent would want to do that. However, something irritated me. He himself did not see the need of putting on a helmet while going on the same ride with his son. This was a classic case of do what I say and not what I do. We all know this, and experts on nurture confirm this, that kids learn by observing and emulating. They subconsciously pick on the behaviors of their parents and those closest to them. This does not always apply to parents, but also those in leadership positions. Your employees or your followers will be more motivated to heed your instructions if your actions are consistent with what you say. Leadership by example, so to speak. Action in asserting authority. Every civilized nation on planet Earth has laws without which there would probably be chaos and unrest. It is stated very clearly that if anyone breaks the law, there are certain consequences of the disobedience. These laws are, however, only taken seriously by the citizens of that nation if they are not just on paper, but are enforced. If someone breaks the law and the state does not act to bring that person to justice, the seriousness of the state will be in doubt, and hence its authority questioned. On the 2nd of April 1982, at exactly 4 a.m., the Argentine armed forces invaded the Falkland Islands. The British government, led by then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, knew that to regain control this territory and assert their authority, they had to take action. Verbal threats alone would not have done the work. The United States tried to convince the British government to enter some sort of negotiated settlement with the Argentinians, but Margaret Thatcher was adamant that there would be no negotiations. The Argentinians had attacked and occupied the islands and therefore had to be removed. On the 1st of May 1982, the British Army began fighting to win back the islands, and after a fierce battle and great loss of lives on both sides, Argentina surrendered on the 4th of June 1982. Decisive action on the part of the British had paid off. Through their decisive action, they made it clear that anyone thinking of forcefully occupying British territory will face consequences. Action in building trust. When I was a young boy between the ages of 10 and 12, One of my uncles lived with us because he had no regular income and therefore could not afford to have an apartment or home of his own. He was fun to be around because he had a good sense of humor and always made me laugh. A very joyful and kind person. However, I also remember him as a person who made promises, but almost always never kept them. He made me many promises and just never kept them. Every time I would ask about what he had promised, he would always have had an excuse why he had not yet fulfilled it, even though months had gone past the deadline he had set himself. He gave those excuses with a warm, charming smile on his face and told me to be patient. Being a kid, I trusted him for a very long time, but then, at a certain point, I just couldn't trust him anymore. He was a nice man, very kind and very loving, but I just couldn't trust his word because his actions contradicted his words. If your words are contrary to your actions, people will not trust you in the long term. They may be patient for some time, but sooner or later they will feel uncomfortable trusting you, even if you are a nice person. You may express your intentions through words, but it is your actions that will prove to you and those around you that your intentions are serious. One of the biggest compliments given to anyone is that he or she is a man or woman of his or her words. When people know that you always keep your word through your actions, they will trust and respect you, even though they may disagree with you sometimes. Consistency in action is key. How would your teeth look if you only brushed them once in a while? What kind of odor would you have if you only took a shower once a month? Would people trust you if you only showed up for appointments with them once in a while? We all know the answer to these questions, and yet there are people who expect to succeed without being consistent in their actions. Taking action is good, but if you are not consistent in your actions, the likelihood of achieving your goals is greatly diminished. If, for example, your goal was to save to buy a house or invest in a business, you may want to have a plan to save a certain amount of your income every month consistently for several years in order to achieve this goal. To ensure that this goes on without a hitch, you may want to automate it so that the monthly amount you have budgeted towards the purchase is automatically transferred from your current account to your savings account every month. If this is done consistently, your financial leverage in a few years will be very strong, and you will move much closer to your goal that at the outset may have seemed insurmountable. I once had an acquaintance who was a great guitarist, and also good in teaching others how to learn playing the guitar. People loved him because apart from his musical skills, he just had a great way to connect to others. Many people asked him to teach them and were ready to pay a substantial amount of money to learn from him. He agreed and decided he would give lessons every Thursday evening. There was a problem, however. His main job was a freelance cameraman who had no regular or fixed working schedule. This meant that he would sometimes be called to do some camera work on Thursday evening. He did not think of this fact while committing himself to giving guitar lessons every Thursday evening. The consequences were inevitable. He was not always able to keep appointments with his students on Thursday evenings, or was sometimes late. Due to this inconsistency, many students withdrew from the class. They loved him, and he was a great guitarist, but these values were not enough to keep them in his class because he was inconsistent. Action and our brains. Whatever we do was first in our mind, and therefore if we want to consistently take actions that are constructive and lead us to our goals, it is imperative that we work on our thought patterns. As humans, we are creatures of habit. Whatever we do consistently, good or bad, becomes a habit engraved in our subconscious mind. In order to save energy, our brains switch to autopilot, our subconscious mind, for 95% of the day. The fact that our subconscious mind controls us a majority of the time is both good and bad news, depending on how it has been programmed. Of course, most of the neural pathways that determine our habits were formed in our childhood through conditioning from our parents and our immediate environment, and that is why it is hard to change habits. But it is not impossible. Do not think of your brain and mind as rigid or fixed, but rather as elastic. Media executives and religious leaders know this. They know that there is power in repetition. By repeatedly and consistently feeding your mind with certain information, your actions will be influenced once this information is accepted by your subconscious mind. Take advantage of this knowledge by filtering what your mind is regularly exposed to. I personally remember the effect of my decision not to watch or listen to the news daily, and the effect it had on my attitude and way of thinking, and ultimately my actions. The difference was amazing. What you listen to regularly, the people you associate with closely, what you watch regularly, all these factors influence your thinking or paradigm, which is a determinant of your actions. Consistent action crystallizes into habit, which then determines your end result. Once your actions have become habit, they become easier to perform because you are basically on autopilot. This applies whether your habits are supportive or destructive to your goals. Humans are indeed creatures of habit.